Witam was bardzo serdecznie. Formal question, Polish or English? Who doesn't speak Polish? They are lying. You don't do Polish? Okay, we can handle that in English, no problem. That's how we roll. And he was lying. He doesn't do English. So, as Jarek said at the beginning, we are trying to leverage the audience. We have this called Tap to Speak. So you can go there, and there will be a few things running. One is that you can ask questions over there, and it will just pops up. There's no moderation whatsoever. We all trust you. Hope you trust us. That's what I thought. You know, just respect the code of conduct. The other thing is there is voting, which I will try to enable, and you should be able to see that. That's the first row. That's a trolling experience. We had this discussion about trolling. We have a person who can moderate that, and we can delete it, what's inappropriate, and we have your names. Okay, so the thing is, we had two wonderful presentation about how we should embrace the changing world to work differently, to work in a future-proof way. We tackled, I think from yesterday, let me introduce the panelists. From Ivona about whether to go for the able corporation or to be just self-employed, or where is the balance. From Andrzej this morning, how we should change ourselves to be able to work differently, to work in a future-proof way. And just recently now, Kasia, who has been teasing us with photographs from Barcelona working remotely. I will never forget that. So what work remotely really means. And there were a few questions afterwards, and a lot of discussions. That's why we have Tap to Speak, because quite a few people were shy to ask question publicly. Now we can type it in. Okay, and then what I would like to tackle is what we've discussed and what we've been presented with is more or less a current situation, how we can work differently or how it looks like. But one thing you have a little bit mentioned in the presentation is that to be able to execute on that, to be able to change the behavior or work remotely, there's a substantial thing that needs to happen within the organization in terms of building a culture. And that's what Pavel said, not Pavel, Piotr, oops, about remote first, for example, or about the culture of organization, about the trolling and behavior and so on and so forth. And that's something you haven't touched much on the in the presentation, but I believe that's very important to what to how we can build the culture of future of work. So I would like to start with to be able to either work remotely or work independently or change the personal behavior. What needs to happen within the organization for it to be ready for execute? Is there anything that needs happening, or what you see from your experience? What were the important, let's say, milestones in changing the culture of organization? Maybe Andrzej, as you are the only male in this panelist group, which is extraordinary.
So what do you identify?
The first question is. Do you believe that there is anything, because you mentioned a lot of like personal development that needs changing. Is there anything within the organization that needs to change for this personal development to be effective, to be successful. You know, I will change myself, but the rest of the organization, do they need to change as well? If they need, so how can we work on that? What do you feel is important in the environment around my personal change for this future of work to be effective and happening?
Okay, so that's a really tough question. And the truth is that I would say it differently. In order for organization to change, the individuals within the organization need to embrace the ideas and the behaviors and mindsets that I spoke of, right? So that's the condition. Now the question is, how can we enact this change in individuals through organizational means? And that's a really tough question to answer, and that's one that we actually don't have a good, solid, researched answer for, right? There are partial answers, or there are theories or concepts, like the one from Patrick Lencioni. Have you heard of the 5 dysfunctions of a team? That's the one I usually start with. Okay, so Patrick Lencioni identifies a way that the team works effectively, and the fundament of this is trust, but not trust as in I trust you that you're going to do what you said, but a trust in the terms that I believe you have the best intention for us together as a team to succeed, right? And that's a requirement to allow ourselves to be vulnerable with each other. So for example, if, let's say, I'm working on a task and I overshoot my estimation, I need help, I am able to say, guys, I need help, right? And instead of being trolled, I will actually be offered help. Or I don't know something, or I failed with something, I made a mistake, right? And the people around me respond in a supportive way instead of laughing at me, right? And so what needs to happen organizationally, what organizations can do to encourage this behavior is leaders need to do it first. At least that's the theory, right? So leaders need to show that they don't have all the answers. They need to go to people and say, okay, I'm approaching this difficult problem. I don't know how to tackle it. Please help me. And that's how you start enacting this change in the organization. So that's like a start, and maybe some people want to comment now.
I've spoken quite a few times with Kasia about diversity aspects of IT, for example. That's where Kasia is very involved in. But I believe that building a diverse culture around starts with pretty much building up the supportive environment where we, let's say, do not troll each other, or we build this safe space for everybody to be able to say what they really feel, or what they want, what they need, and express themselves. And Kasia, in your previous companies and your current companies, you've experienced quite a few different approaches towards building this supportive environment. And even though that's from our private conversations, even though sometimes there were trolling here and there, overall, what you said, you didn't feel like you've been attacked in a very personal way. So has it succeeded, or it didn't, and how we can build it as a organization?
Okay, I think one. Okay, I think software developers and IT industry has quite interesting sense of humor, and I really like it. But sometimes it's difficult to be able to stand out and say no, please don't. But after a few years, I figure out that it's not a problem for me to say I'm not feel comfortable with your comments, and if I say it loud, then my teammates just stop doing that. So it's not a big problem for me, but I think for some people it could be. And in my current company, everyone tried to be very polite and ask me if I feel comfortable with any suggestions or comments about project, about my work, and so on.
Okay, but very often there's this situation when somebody is not feeling right with some comments or with something that has been spoken out loudly, either at the meeting or during the text, the Slack exchange, or at stand-up. And one thing is saying, well, I don't feel okay with that, but that requires a lot of courage from a person.
Yes, that's right.
But the other thing is, do you believe that there is also a kind of a milestone coming from management side that should behave in a certain way, and what is the expectation of such behavior?
Yes, top management is responsible for that company culture, and in my opinion, they have to say stop. It's not our approach to behave in this way. So if someone is not bullying but trolling in official channels or in person, face to face, then top manager, team leader, and owner should say loud, this is not allowed to behave in this way.
Should it be public or on the Slack channel, and like how technically that should be? Because many people in many situations there is this saying, oh yes, we should have done it, or yes, but I didn't know how should I stand up and say that.
Okay, it could be tricky.
That's why I'm asking that question.
Because there is a approach that we should say bad things in person and good things loud in a team, in the front of the rest. And this situation, when someone is behaving in a very, very bad way, with trolling, with bullying even, then top management is responsible for say it loud, really on Slack channel, stop, and in person explain why it's not good to go with this way.
Okay.
May I add?
Yes.
Okay. So I just want to add that yes, the culture starts with leadership, and it's also on us. So if we see that manager, whoever leader, doesn't react, we need to react, right? If we don't like the behavior. And I'll give you an example. I was facilitating a mentoring group, and the group agreed at the start that their rules are no use of electronic devices, that we work, that we discuss, and we focus on what we're doing, right? And then one person in the group started looking at their mobile phone, and the other person said, wait, what are you doing? Like, we agreed, all of us committed, we're not going to look at phones during that meeting. And this was much more powerful from a peer than from a facilitator or anybody, because he could directly see that another person is affected, and it's very powerful. I wouldn't discard that.
You said, talking back on this supportive behavior, because we have one question from Michal over here. Well, it's down the stream already. Is it? Do you believe that building this kind of culture is a milestone in terms of employees' happiness, or it's like, does it increase people's engagement and the way they work with the company, or it's kind of something as basic as providing a computer to work? Like this is like a baseline, the supportive behavior, or you believe that you can leverage it towards kind of people's happiness, and how, if you can leverage, how you can leverage. Like, is this supportive behavior a must, or it's and it's for granted? And then if you have it, how can you build on that? Is there are there any other things related to this, to building this culture? Like, for example, I know one-on-ones with the employees, or one-on-one with your peers that can support the culture, support this change, and if so, what are those other type of activities that you can do with the organization? Like, do you do one-on-one meetings with your peers or with your teammates? If so, how you can use, do you use them to build up this culture, to build up this change? Does it make people happy? Does it make people happier? Are you building a kind of relationship with them during these meetings? No? Yes? Yeah, it's like a kind of open question of how you support this change, and how you personally within your team, what do you do to build this culture?
So yes, I'm actually a manager. I'm not working in a flat organization. So I do a lot of that during one-on-ones, and also during, like, whenever I can. So for example, I can tell you that actually I made people uncomfortable around me. So I will talk about it, why I decided to do that. Because basically we were in a meeting room and our time was up, and we haven't noticed it in a conversation, and another person came in and said, "Get out," right? Because, you know, they had this room booked. I said, "Okay." Immediately on the spot, I have feedback to it. Do you want to hear it? And she said yes, and I said, okay, like, I don't like the way you said this. Like, okay, it was my fault not to leave. You could have communicated in a better way. People around were very uncomfortable and giving this feedback publicly, but I did it, and I explained to everyone why. Because I needed to show it's unacceptable, right? She could say, "Excuse me, the time is out," and I would get out as quickly as I could. No problem, right? And that's the kind of behavior. So in one-on-ones, I also coach people a lot how to talk to other people in a way that is supportive of the culture instead of destroying it, right? So I mentioned during my presentation that sometimes people come to me and say to me things, "Oh, I have this problem in a relationship," or that problem, right? And they describe it very clearly to me, but then they can't do the same to the other person, right? So I encourage them, okay, you need to go directly to that person and speak to them, and just use the same words that you did to me, and you'll see what kind of charm it works. And more often than not, they are surprised. Like, if I have a problem with someone, I openly and honestly, with care and with respect, speak about this, those problems are, you know, getting solved. Those people can actually talk to each other. So, for example, one thing that I discourage is that they depend on me in solving their issues, right, with the teammates. So if they have a problem with someone, I always require them to first speak to the person directly. So these are a couple of techniques. I could, like, go on, but I don't want to. Maybe you have comments on that.
That brings me to one of the questions that are here. Do you believe, and that's a question to all of you, do you believe that a company should enforce a cultural code of conduct, or you are rather to leave it to more, as somebody put it, common sense, or individual discussion on one-on-one when you are supporting this culture and building this environment?
One thing which comes to my mind in this moment is something about also the feedback. Maybe it is not also related to this question. However, I think that once you need to give someone the feedback and you need to get the feedback, the most important thing is to have a trust in the company. Because if you would like to tell someone something bad, he needs to know that this is something which is going to be supportive for him. So I think that this is very important, that people will trust each other to tell something and not to feel offensed. So this is the important thing, I think.
Do you believe that you can enforce this trust or non-offensive behavior through code of conduct, or it's a total misuse in terms of, for example, your organization? Obviously, that depends probably on the size, but you would rather talk it through on one-on-ones with people and try to influence their behavior that way. Maybe you, Kasia, how you feel about code of conduct in the organizations?
I think both ways.
Okay.
Because first of all, common agreement with whole team is very important, and we always have some people who don't understand approach or particular thing in this code of conduct or way of working in this company. So then one-on-one just happen. And, you know, if I explain in person how it works and why it's so important to comfortable for comfort for everyone, then it will be much easier to implement this culture or smart part of that culture in whole team. But in the end, an example is from the top and from my side and every teammate.
Okay. If a person on a team is resistant to this influence of you on the one-on-ones and persist on a behavior that either you from the management side or the leader side or as a team perceived as the appropriate behavior, what should you do? How you can effectively deal with those bad faith actors, as Karol put it on the question? How can you effectively deal with people who are resistant to this change? And maybe the question should be, should you deal at all with those? Maybe you should just expel them from the team. Like, what's the best approach?
Okay, so
is the effort worth?
Yeah. So first of all, in fact, I met in my professional career very few people who literally had bad intentions. In most cases, what was going on is people didn't have the communication skills to communicate with others what's going on inside them. So instead of, they didn't understand the emotions that they have, and they burst with anger, for example, or you know, they said some offensive things because this was the only thing that they could do, right? And in such cases, usually what I do is I show them, okay, this is the outcome you wanted to get. You wanted to convince this person, right, of, you know, doing something different, of embracing some other technique or solution. Have you succeeded? And most people say no, because they don't, because it doesn't work when you burst with anger at someone, right? Okay, do you want to learn? Yes. And then they are open to actually learning how to communicate what's inside them. And I can tell you that I find it hard to actually think now, and I've worked professionally for 20 years, I find it hard to find even a single person that after going through that conversation and going through actual teaching of the communication skills that they wouldn't change. Because people want to do a great job and they don't want to be jerks. That's my experience.
Okay.
I had to let go of people for other reasons in my career, right? But rarely for this one. However, if someone wouldn't respond to this, I would say definitely we need to get rid of the bad apples from the teams because the cost is not worth it. And I would do it without, blinking, because as a leader, my main responsibility is to the team, right? And if the team is being harmed, what can I do? I have responsibility to them.
Okay.
So if you, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So if you meet the person who is resistant for these changes, do you try to find a reason why he or she is resistant? What's the problem she's being afraid of, or he?
Well, I just described. In my experience, most of these people just don't have communication skills to communicate what's going on inside them, right? So I teach them those skills, and they change.
So it was always about communication, nothing more?
Well, no, I agree with you that it is about something more. It's also about mindset. So remember, I think the thing I talked about in my presentation is very often those people that are difficult to deal with, they are very sad that they are right and correct. We need to get rid of that mindset. Like we need to assume we can be wrong, and we need to test our assumptions and our beliefs and put them to public test. And yes, there are some people who are difficult to deal with because they assume they are always right. But then I tell them exactly the same thing, like, are you actually achieving the influence that you want? And they are getting convinced to change their ways because they want to be more effective. Like, if they are right and they are certain that their solution is the best, they see that the changes I show them in how they communicate with others actually are effective, right? And then their mindset changes as well, because you see, how we communicate is how we think. If you think in your brain, right, you think with words. People don't understand it, and they think they are making shortcuts, like, I just said it because I wanted to avoid lengthy conversation. No, don't do that, because what you say is what you think. And I teach them that, and they are getting better. And as I said, it is hard for me to think of a single case where we couldn't turn this person around. I can think of other people, like people who are lazy, right? And this was very damaging for the team too, or they were avoiding work and stuff like that. But people who, open to communication training, it's possible to help them.
Okay, so from what I see is that this individual conversation are extremely important to support and build up the culture. But on the other hand, there are a lot of questions and also a lot of interest in working remotely. And for example, Ivona was also talking about this at her presentation, about this balance between being employee and doing some contractual individual work, where you have very little, very few occasions to have those individual conversations, those one-on-ones, or you have, like, how you do those one-on-ones, those individual conversations when you do mostly individual remote work, where you are taking this inspiration, this feedback from when you, that's a question for you, Ivona. If you work a lot of on your own, or you work a lot of remotely, where this feedback is coming from?
So this is very hard in the remote work, since you are always somewhere apart from the people. So this is important to have some tools like camera with Skype or Hangouts or Slack even, and to have the often contacts between you and your colleagues and your managers and so on. All the people you are cooperating with. Since this is very important to not to feel alone at home or in the office where you are working, just to be in the direct connection with the people.
Okay.
So I guess these one-on-ones are also possible in the remote work. However, this needs much more effort, because you need to to join some channel, to set up the video. Sometimes people do not like to use video in remote work. Okay. This happens.
Kashu, how it worked in your previous company, which was purely remote, and did you have those one-on-ones, individual sessions, or?
It wasn't a rule. It was like suggestion.
Okay.
To have meeting one-on-one and have a kind of recap of my work, of my achievements and goals. But now we have one-on-one, even remotely, and it's one meeting per month, and it works. Like, you know, we have Skype or Slack conversation online, like video, and it's totally okay when I can see my my boss, and we can talk about next steps. It's not a problem in remote work to have one-on-one, because it's directly the same thing when we have stand-ups. Because technology allows us to have any meetings online, and maybe the concern is that I'm not in person like now, but I see face, I see emotions.
Okay. Okay. Do you believe, and that's a general question to all of you, do you believe that this transition from office-centric company to a remote-centric company is even possible? Because we tackled, okay, we started from building a culture, from doing some individuals one-on-ones, to taking this personal, direct communication like we are doing here to over the Skype something. What else needs to happen for this company to move from very office-centric thing to a remote? Like my personal experience, for example, is that even though many companies say they support remote work, whenever you are not in the office, you feel like totally out of the loop of the communication. Like things are happening, decisions are taken, but you have no clue whatsoever what's going on. What needs to happen for the company to make this transition successful? Or taking the question the other way around, what needs to happen for the remote employees or remote cooperators be happy and successful within a company? Is there anything you can think of and give us a hint how we can change this culture?
Step by step.
Okay, so what's the first step?
First step, one rule, remote first, then every mention, every decision should be, for example, on Slack. And of course, at the beginning, it will be difficult because sometimes we forgot, sometimes anyone is not responsible for doing notes. And after a few times, I think it's possible to get one small step forward.
Okay. Ivona?
I think about something like this, that maybe not everyone would be able to work remotely. This is something I mentioned in my presentation yesterday, that maybe if the company wants to go totally from being office-centered to remote, there may be a problem that a few people may not be able to get to work this way. So I feel this as a problem then.
Okay.
Totally.
Yeah.
How long does it take a company, if you can name any companies that went from this office-centric behavior to the remote, fully or partly, and how long does this process take? Like if I would like to start now, is it like a year or 2 years of intensive work? Like, do you have any indication? What should I expect?
I'm not sure what to tell you because I don't have such an experience. However, I think that the best to start is to try to work a few days, just maybe 1 day or 2 days a week, the week after the week. And once you will learn how to work from home, you will be able to do this at the 100% time.
Okay. Though I see that when companies execute on the single day off, for example, like Fridays work from home, many people tend to accumulate work for Friday. Like they do all the office communication stuff in the office, so they collect kind of a bunch of tickets to execute on a Friday, so they don't need any communication with the peers whatsoever because everything is sorted out, and they just do it, which is, okay, a way to go for people to understand how they work at home, like do not do the laundry instead of working, for example, but it doesn't support the communication at all because people do things in exactly the same way, though they are at home.
Okay, step back. And that what you said, yes, it's very important. And I'd like to add one thing before this 1 day off, set up a process to communicate in a remote way. Because if we have office-centered company and we try to figure out how to go in a remote way, we should know how it works, like a process, and what kind of tools we should use, how many times we should call to each other, and so on. So set up these steps will be very helpful to work, for example, for 1 day in the week.
Okay. Do you believe that this setup, this tooling, should be as easy as possible, or there is a question like, should it be more of a virtual reality technology thing that you embrace in the office, not being in the office, or as simple as possible?
As simple as possible. For first time, as simple as possible. If it doesn't work, and we need something more sophisticated, then we should we can try to find something extra. But for the first time, as simple as possible.
Okay. Imagine that we succeeded in this starting the remote thing. What you believe is that then we have this problem of I call it work-life balance or life-life balance, where you sit at home and you are at home but you're in the office, so you kind of split your day between doing the lunch, not only for you but also for the family, and doing some work and so on and so forth. And you end up pretty much spending whole day both working and not working. Do you have an indication whether you should be more strict or like these working hours, or you should kind of not exceed more than 6 hours per day, like working, because that will kill your whatever, like that won't be good for you? What's your tips from your remote or individual work experience, like how you should tackle that?
Oh my, everyone is different, and for me it works like I'm very effective in the afternoon, so I try to wake up at 8:30 and start work at 9. For few hours I'm really effective, but then I have to have a small break because my brain is, overload. And after 5 I start to work for other tasks if I don't have to achieve something before that hour. So my advice is to explore your day work and find these spots when you are the most effective, because then this work is done in the shortest way.
And Ivona, what's your approach?
My approach is pretty different because I start very early in the morning. So every important things I try to achieve before noon. And in noon, in the afternoon, I'm trying to do something which needs less energy. So something like answering emails, some meetings, and so on.
Okay.
So I think that, as you mentioned, it's different from person to person.
Yeah. Now I try, for example, this approach when I have, for example, for 3 days, very focused work on strategy, and 2 days for meetings, because I have no distractions in those 3 days.
Okay. One of the important things that comes with the remote work, where the company has kind of no visibility of people actually working, which means sitting by the desk, which also is kind of requires a change, as was put in one of the questions from Michał, the effort-based work, for example, spending 8 hours, to outcome-based work, so pretty much delivering a thing, regardless whether it took us 8 hours or 4 hours. We just did the thing. Do you believe, and that's a question to you, Andrzej, because you are working in a more traditional company or non-remote company, at least in Gdańsk. Do you believe that this is something that companies are able to introduce, or are is it really a thing, or is it really possible for the companies to change this attitude to outcome-based work, and do you feel it will work, or there is a huge incentive into looking at the hours and spending actual hours by the desk?
Okay, so in our company, nobody checks how many hours anybody works. In fact, if someone works for whatever reason, because they stayed 2 hours longer in the office, they wanted to finish that week the project or whatever, they can take it back, and nobody checks whether they actually did work more those hours, and they are taking a day off because last week they worked 2 hours, longer for 4 days. Nobody checks that. So in fact, we are already in the outcome-based world, where
require 40 hours, right?
Sorry?
You still require 40 hours. Why,
But how do I know that someone did 40 or 50 or 30?
But you said that somebody spent 2 hours less last week, so that it adds 2 hours to the next week, which is effort-based.
So what I said is that if you spend, for example, more hours this week, right, you can take it back, but we don't check it as a company. We just assume that what you're saying is true, right? Yes, pretty much, right? So, but what I'm saying is, whether we like to work with you, whether your team enjoys working with you, doesn't depend on whether you are in the office, right? It depends what kind of outcome you produce. What are your work results already, right? So if you look at our employment contracts, right, yes, it is effort-based, it is a standard Polish employment contract, right? But the truth is that we look at how much you delivered. If, for example, 2 months in a row, you are in the office physically, but you haven't delivered anything, someone will be interested. On the other hand, if you're not seeing that much, but you are still delivering as much as other people, and you have previously, then okay, well, everything is fine probably, right? So I think we're already there, to be honest. So I would say that our employment contract is a different kind of contract. It's a much more like long-term engagement, that we know that sometimes you will have off weeks, you will deliver less, right? Sometimes you will have great weeks, you will deliver more, right? So we have this long-term contract that is effort-based, that is based on Polish law and so on. And it's good for you, because you know that if you have off week, you will still get paid. It's good for us, because we know that if you have a great week, you will not charge us more. That's how I see it.
We are kind of coming towards the end. The time is more or less up, and I don't want to take the break and the lunch and so on. Queuing is essential as well. But I have one final question, which also is here, as somebody asked that. Because what we described in terms of attitudes toward people and the way people work, the way that people choose what to work on, kind of drives us towards something that Frederic Laloux described as in his book, Work Differently. So Turkish organization, how call it? Turkish tilt organizations. Do you believe that this kind of organization, this Work Differently, is the future of how we gonna work? You can say just yes or no, or if you would like to elaborate on that. Yeah, that's a question to you for everybody as a sum up.
Let me start. I believe that in our economy, globally, we should have all kind of organizations, and teal organizations are one of them, because we are different and we have different approaches. So some of us like to have manager and be managed by someone. Some of us are self-managed, so we feel like a driver of the project and our goals. So yeah, in my opinion, all kind of organizations should be on the market.
Okay. Andrzej?
So foreseeing the future is a very, difficult business to be in. I would say this. Eventually, we would probably go towards teal organizations because of their effectiveness. I'm not sure if humanity will stay around for such a long time. So the reason is like whether we can change enough as individuals, those are the things that I talked, to actually have so many teal organizations. That's a question in my mind. Okay. Thank you.
Ivana?
I agree with Kasia, because I think that it depends from the people. So probably someone needs to have a manager and someone doesn't. So I think that there is a place in the world for both, for all the types of the organizations.
Okay.
I'd like to add that my previous company was is teal, and it was absolutely amazing experience. And now there is a more traditional with management, and in both companies are absolutely amazing people. So we can handle that.
Okay. So, thank you very much. Thank you for joining, and hope you enjoyed that. And please give a feedback in the surveys, because we are always keen on knowing whether we should go on with this kind of conversation and discussions, or that's something totally worthless. And so your feedback is also very, very important for us. So thank you very much, and enjoy the lunch.